to our first interview of the day. And we're speaking with Julian McKinley King and Jomo Hutaa, who are going to join us to speak about what is going on in West Papua. Gentlemen, you're welcome to iCulture TV Radio Culture.
Hello, Kwesi.
Hi, Julian. How are you, sir?
Hey, I'm fine. How are you? Hey, Jomo.
Yes, brother Julian.
Hey,
how are you?
Good to see you. Hey, fine.
All right. So it looks like we're going to have a very good discussion here, and people are going to learn, some of us for the first time, what is going on in West Papua. Some of us will be refreshing our knowledge on what exactly is going on in West Papua, being as we will be speaking with people who have first-hand knowledge about this subject. Before that, let's watch this short video. We will be right back to discuss.
The Papuans were a relatively small population, living mostly in the island's center. With no great cities, the Europeans didn't think much of them. The Spanish named the island New Guinea, since it reminded them of Guinea and Africa, but mostly left it alone. That changed with the Dutch, who arrived permanently in the 19th century. They already controlled much of the East Indies and set up a few small ports on the western part of the island. The island was mostly a buffer zone against rival European power for more valuable Dutch-controlled islands west of it. The Dutch ruled it indirectly via the Sultan of Tidore, and no more than a few hundred Dutch colonists settled on the island at any one time. In 1848, the British also showed an interest and agreed to divide the claims to the island with the Dutch. Aside from a small bump around the Fly River, this straight line didn't reflect any reality on the ground. It was just a convenience for the colonial powers to do it that way. After 1848, the British colonized some parts of the eastern island, but the Germans also muscled in for their short-lived colonial empire and carved off a chunk too. That was until 1914, when the First World War broke out, and the British, or more accurately Australian troops fighting for the British Empire, captured it from them. After the war, Australia took control of the eastern half, and, aside from Japanese occupation during the Second World War, they remained under Australian control until their independence as Papua New Guinea in 1975. In contrast, Western New Guinea would have a much rougher experience, as its Dutch colonial masters relinquished their overseas empire. With the end of the Second World War, Indonesia demanded its independence. A sense of shared identity spread among the former Dutch East Indies, hardening in the fact of Japanese brutality, and the thought of returning to the control of another foreign occupier after the war was unacceptable. Sukarno and Muhammad Hatta declared Indonesians' independence on August 17, 1945, just 2 days after Japan's formal surrender. A protracted political and armed conflict with the Dutch followed, as the European power made a futile attempt to reassert its control. Western New Guinea, usually just called Papua, or West Irian to Indonesians, sat oddly in the decolonization process. With a relatively small native population, an even smaller Dutch presence, and no real representation in Indonesia's independence movement, nor Dutch administration, the voice and perspective of its people was largely ignored. Indonesia's view at first was mixed. Hatta's initial thoughts were that Papua should be independent, saying that it should be left to the Papuan people themselves. I recognize that the Papuans have the right to be an independent nation. This opinion did not win out. A hardening attitude to the Dutch and the discovery of oil made it impossible for Indonesia to pass up the area that they dubbed West Irian. The 1946 Linggajati Agreement with the Dutch had implied that Indonesia would be entitled to all former territory of the Dutch East Indies. When serious fighting erupted in the following years, the Dutch considered the agreement voided, and had never explicitly promised them Papua anyway, while the Indonesians upheld their claim. By the late...
Okay, we will be back to tell the rest of the story, and I did, if you want the full story, you can check the full video on Knowledge on YouTube. But let's go now and talk more about what exactly is going on in West Papua. Julian, thank you very much for joining us, first of all. And just so we know who you are, right? Because now we're looking at you, we're looking at Jomo, obviously not from West Papua by by origin, but here you are speaking for West Papua. So let's find out, who are you first of all, so we can place the whole discussion in its proper context. Julian.
Thank you, Kwesi. Yeah, I've been supporting West Papua's independence for the last couple of decades. Working at the University of Sydney, we had a West Papua project advocating for West Papua's independence. And more recently, I've been doing a PhD undertaking field research and legal research, looking at why West Papua was denied its rightful independence.
Okay. And what's the association with West Papua? I mean, you, apart from the research and everything, here you are speaking for the people's rights, something that you normally find the indigenous people doing. What's the association there?
I'm working with the OPM. The OPM is the Revolutionary Liberation Group inside West Papua. They've been struggling since 1965 for their rightful independence. It's a war of liberation. It's very much unheard of, and I'm trying to bring it to the attention of the outside world.
What's the motivation?
Well, they're our closest neighbors, Kwesi, and my grandparents and their generation, they were in Papua fighting alongside the Papuan people for our freedom. And if the Papuan people did not support the Australians during World War II, then people like myself probably wouldn't be here.
I see. Now, West Papua is not a story you hear every day. Why is it not out there in the mainstream media? And by the way, full disclosure, Julian, I went to school in Australia. I studied in Australia. I did my master's in journalism in Australia. And West Papua kept coming up in journalism class. However, it's treated as a side note. It's never really in the mainstream media. Why is that? Why do you think so?
It's intentional, Kwesi. The Australian government and the Western governments, they don't want the population knowing that there is a case of genocide occurring on the ground, because we are complicit. It is the Australian governments, the American governments, and their corporations who are taking the resources from West Papua, while at the same time they are training and arming the Indonesian military to conduct their genocidal program. It's another example of ongoing colonization, neo-colonization by the colonial powers.
So help us understand this, because obviously you understand, you know a lot more. So it's easy for you to put it in a few lines. But for some of us hearing this for the first time, help us build a picture. What's the interest for Australia? Why would Australia be interested in perpetrating a genocide against the people of West Papua?
Well, it wasn't always that way. Back in 1957, Australia made an agreement with the Dutch. Australia had the eastern side of the island, colonial territory, and the Dutch had the west, of course. And they were progressive, and they made an agreement to coordinate their decolonization so that the entire islands could return to being one island without this artificial border running down the middle, cutting through people's houses and gardens and level lands. But then in 1962, the American Rockefellers coerced the American government to transfer the territory to Indonesia because they discovered the world's biggest gold deposit in West Papua. And ever since then, it's been a battle for resources. And so the transfer to the United Nations in 62, the territory was first transferred to the UN in 62, and then it was transferred from the UN to Indonesia in 63. And that process was illegal under the Charter of the United Nations and the resolutions governing decolonization. You may have heard they had an act of self-determination in 1969, which was overseen by the United Nations. They allowed the Indonesians to handpick 1,000 people out of a total population of almost 1 million. So that's 0.1%. That's universal suffrage in breach of the Charter, in breach of resolutions governing decolonisation. And all of this occurred with the complicity of the United Nations for the benefit, as I say, of some of the richest families in the world.
That's interesting, and that's very interesting. But let me still probe that a little bit more, if you don't mind, Julian.
Sure.
Australia and let me put it this way. Currently, as we speak, what form of government is West Papua under? Are they a semi-autonomous people? Are they like the Aboriginal people of Australia, for instance? Are they under Indonesian rule? What's going on there?
Well, they've been under Indonesian control, under Indonesian rule since 1963.
Mm-hmm.
And Indonesia is very much a military dictatorship. The current president is a Kapassus, that's an Indonesian general, who is alleged to have carried out multiple war crimes, both in East Timor and in West Papua in his earlier years. The people are being oppressed. Anyone who stands out, protests, are beaten, are arrested, they disappear. People in the villages are currently being bombed. I don't know if you've managed to see the footage that I sent to Jomo, but we have recent aerial footage of drones dropping bombs on villages, on planes, dropping bombs on the highlands, on helicopter gunships, strafing villages. It is a case of genocide, according to multiple legal scholars and even the United Nations.
And these are Indonesian planes?
These are Indonesian planes supplied by the West. They are planes and helicopters supplied by Australia, supplied by America, tanks supplied by Germany, supplied by Israel, Belgium. It is all the Western powers that are complicit in this program.
Let's talk about you a little bit, and this will connect with the rest of our conversation. Recently, you were accused of smuggling arms into that region, and I read the charge, and I think it was a bit laughable because you are accused of smuggling a handgun and a pocket full of bullets or something like that.
Correct.
What was it about?
Yeah, we, my colleague Amatus and myself, went over to West Papua in 2022 to collect evidence for the International Criminal Court. I filmed the villages that have been bombed. I interviewed the victims. We spent 3 weeks traveling around in the highlands. And then when we came back to Australia, I came into all of the details for legal reasons. We're yet to go to court. But we were what they call entrapped. We were coerced by undercover ASIO agents and Australian Federal Police. That is the equivalent to the CIA. They have entrapped us. The two people seeking to bring attention to the International Criminal Court, Australia's complicity, West complicity in genocide.
Mm. So I've heard you use the word genocide a few times, and you've given an example of the drones dropping the bombs and all that. Give us a bigger picture of that. Why are you using genocide?
Sure, Kwesi. Well, for example, you know that the island is cut roughly in half. The current population of Papua New Guinea, which is independent, is somewhere between 10 and 12 billion people. The population of the indigenous Papuans in West Papua are somewhere around 2.5 or 2 billion people. The population of the Javanese, that is the Indonesians that have been migrated over there, is about the same. It's about 2.5 million people. Now, there is a publication in 2004 called the Encyclopedia of Genocide, where one of my supervisors calculated that around 1.6 million Papuans have lost their life over the 60-year period of Indonesian occupation. That was in 2004. So if you extrapolate that graph from 2004 until today, we now have a loss of life reaching 2.5 million. It is one of the biggest cases of genocide in the world.
And all that goes unreported. That's my biggest worry. In terms of defense, we have heard that the organization that you speak for have a revolutionary wing, actually, or maybe it's the revolutionary wing that you actually speak for, right? So there's some sort of resistance. What's the resistance looking like? Are they putting up anything that's standing up to the oppressor?
It's quite remarkable, Kwesi. They are relatively small groups of young men, anywhere from 15, 25, 35, not many above the age of 40, mostly armed with bows and arrows and traditional weapons and a few guns that they've seized from the Indonesians. And yet they are surviving, and yet they are, according to our reports, they are having less casualties than the Indonesians, and yet the Indonesians have one of the biggest armies in Southeast Asia, with helicopter gunships, with tanks, with all the modern weapons that you can imagine.
Recently, there were reports of a pilot who was captured by this group, and there were threats to execute him and all that. Did you hear about that?
Yes, I was involved in the negotiations for his release. So I was drafting letters on behalf of the OPM in negotiations with the New Zealand and the Australian governments. This is another thing that the government is accusing us of doing, is threatening the life of the pilot. This has been an ongoing tactic by the OPM, the liberation fighters, to draw attention to the occupation of their country. They've been doing that since the 1970s, and it's remarkable that in every case they release the hostages after the negotiations fail, as they have done with the recent case of the New Zealand pilot.
So when you say they've been doing that, doing what? Kidnapping people?
Correct. Yeah, kidnapping Indonesian military, kidnapping Europeans that were trekking through one of the national parks back in, I think it was 1996. They held them for some 9 months, and then they released them. There was no harm to them. So it's simply a method of
like a bargaining chip type of thing. But after a while, with consistently releasing these people, do you think it will hold that substance anymore? If they capture somebody, they'll be like, you know what? Because again, I asked this because I heard one of the leaders stating that that's not in line with their culture. So they don't even feel comfortable doing what they're doing. They're doing it out of necessity.
Yeah, that's why they released them.
Yeah. But how much currency would people put on that though after a while? Like, oh, these harmless people, they would not execute this guy at all.
Yeah, that's the case.
All right. But okay, so let's go back again. What exactly are the people of West Papua asking for? We know they want autonomy. Do they want their, and they have their own flag and all of that, right? Please tell us a little more so that we can properly align ourselves with their cause. For those of us who know nothing at all about what's going on there, obviously because of this, stifling of news coming from there. But what exactly are the people of West Papua saying to the rest of the world? How can we support the people of West Papua?
Well, simply, Kwesi, they want their freedom. They don't want to be occupied by a military force. They don't want to be killed, slaughtered, raped. Women go into hospitals for minor operations, and while they're there, they become sterilized. food is distributed which has been infected with poison. Blankets and pigs have been distributed that have already had tuberculosis injected into them to wipe out the population. It is an intentional program to wipe out the people so that the Indonesians can take their land and that the Western corporations can take their resources. So as your documentary showed us, the people were being prepared for independence as they were entitled to back in 1961. They had their own flag, had their own national anthem, and the Dutch were doing the right thing. They were more progressive than the Australians on the eastern side. But then, of course, the Americans intervened, the United Nations intervened, and that independence was denied. And simply put, all they want is their freedom.
So what's that freedom going to look like? Is that like a completely new country altogether, with its own government, its own civil service, its own? Is that what we're looking at?
We are looking at pretty much the same case as East Timor. If you remember East Timor, just next door, that was invaded by Indonesia in 1975, I think it was. And then the Indonesians were forced to withdraw in 1999 after the United Nations supervised an act of self-determination. The West Papuan people don't need an act of self-determination because they've already declared to the world that they plan to be independent. And the liberation movement has gone through some 60 years now of evolution with their own political program, and it's quite unique. They have initially they had a government, a de facto government, but they found that government was really corrupt, and so in 1992 they established a new system of decentralization, where each local region would have its own local system of governance, and they would establish their own military campaign. And then those local decentralized units would then come together as they felt fit to coordinate larger enterprises. So I think they have their system of governance already. It's simply a matter of allowing them to implement it.
Now, Julian, I've also heard you say some things that people might consider quite heavy, right? About the genocide and all of that, the blankets and all that. This is something we used to hear about 400 years ago. That was used to see on the Aboriginal people in Australia and all that. You're saying that this is actually happening today?
It's still happening. Yeah. Yeah, sure. I can give you multiple reports from legal scholars, from intelligence agencies, and even the United Nations Social and Economic Council put out a report in 2013 detailing the case of genocide. It's been around a long time. The problem is, as you say, it's not getting media attention.
And has it been brought to, obviously, because you mentioned the United Nations now, but has it been, or to what level has it been brought to the attention of the United Nations? And who's even representing the people of West Papua? The same powers that are oppressing them would be representing them at the United Nations, isn't it?
That's correct. The problem we have, Kwesi, is that under the current system of international law governed by the Charter of the United Nations, Indigenous people have no legal standing. Legal standing means they have no right, no access to the international courts. Only member states, only members of the United Nations can access these courts, the International Court of Justice, for example, to have West Papua's case determined. So the West Papuan people are reliant on a sympathetic member state to take their case on their behalf.
You said who's taking the case on their behalf?
They need a sympathetic country to do that.
To do that, okay, all right, yes. And at this level, at this point, it sounds like nobody's doing that.
No one's doing that. The closest we have had was 2010. The Vanuatu government, also Melanesian people in the Pacific, they moved a motion, a unanimous motion in their parliament to have West Papua's case put before the International Court of Justice. That was in 2010. However, it never went ahead.
I'm tempted to ask why, but I know you're not the right person to answer why. Of course, you know why, but I'm asking why, as in why. Like, anyhow, let's. So, Julian, if we look at the total picture, right? We there's the case of, say, Palestine, for instance, where to some degree it's been brought to the attention of the world, to the point where even the United Nations has acknowledged that, what's going on there and everything like that. At this point, what is the strategy? And I see people like you and others, fighting a cause. It's more, I see more resistance, but educate us. What's the strategy? What is going to happen next? And how can the rest of the world plug in to make that happen?
Well, unfortunately, rightly or wrongly, our world is run by the current international legal system. And as I say, the only way that we're really going to see any real change is if one of the members of the United Nations does what they're supposed to do, and that is uphold international law. As a member of the UN, you have an undertaking under Article 1 to uphold the Charter. And then we have other conventions, such as the Genocide Convention, of which Australia was the first signatory. Now, under that convention, you have a legal obligation to act to prevent genocide. The problem is that these countries, these governments, are not upholding international law.
And I am very much interested in what the rest of the world can do to make them uphold international law. Because, like I said, you are doing a great job bringing it to the attention of the world. But a lot of us are processing all the information we're getting, and all we're getting personally is a feeling of hopelessness, because we don't have anybody representing the people. The same oppressor is the same one that's representing them in the world body. I'm trying to see how the world can really, what should we do? Create a hashtag? What should we do? March on the United Nations? What do you recommend, Julian?
I think the best thing is to do what the people of Vanuatu did back in 2010, and that is lobby your own representatives, your own government, to uphold international law. Take the case to the International Court of Justice. It's a simple thing. It's simply a matter of filling out pieces of paper, filling out pieces of paper and lodging those pieces of paper with the court. Likewise with the International Criminal Court in The Hague. If you think there's a case of genocide occurring somewhere, you have a legal obligation to put that case to the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court and seek the prosecutor to investigate. That's all that's required. It's simply filling in pieces of paper.
And I understand that in Ghana, you are doing some work in conjunction with our brother Jomo Hutaa. His camera is deactivated for some reason, so I still see him in the green room, but his camera is deactivated. I wish he would come on and speak a little about this, because the next segment of the interview, we're going to be talking about what the work you're doing in Ghana, trying to draw the government's attention to what's going on there. This is some of the stuff that you were doing to up the ante a little bit, raise the temperature a notch. Is that the case?
Yes, well, Kwesi, yeah. I mean, I don't know quite how it happened, but Brother Jomo contacted me through social media and we got talking. And he mentioned that Ghana was one of the most prominent countries speaking up on behalf of the West Papuan people back in 1969. So I sent him my papers and legal strategy for putting West Papua's case to the court. And so from there, we've been seeking to lobby your government, or the government of Ghana, to carry out such a program.
I see. And how much progress have you made with that so far, before I have Jomo come in?
You'll have to ask Jomo about that. I'm not sure.
I will let Jomo speak that, and then I'll come back to you with the next question. Jomo, welcome to the show. I don't know if I saw you in the green room. I don't know if you were still checking, if you heard most of what you said. But we are talking about, at this point, the efforts being made in Ghana on behalf of the people of West Papua. You, so to speak, will be the representative to connect with. What's the work? What's going on? What work is going on for the people of West Papua in Ghana?
Right at the moment, we started a new campaign, because we did that in 2008 when President John Mahama had his first term. During his time, Benny Wada, who was the head of the Free West Papua campaign, was invited to Ghana to come in during the 6 months. We were on the process of getting this legal backing from the government. Then, critically, Kwame was the president who made a statement about the League of Nations. So, Papa hold down as a country, they knew help them get that. So, from 2000, was a with the campaign here at the moment for the we have started again back here. So we said of the document. We are planning now to get brother Julian coming in Ghana or entity from West coming to come join us so we can with this issues and that other organizations
Okay. For some reason, I'm not sure. The sound is not the best coming from your speaking, but I heard most of what you said, though. And congratulations on the work you're doing, Jomo. Let me ask you again, Julian. So, okay? So let me put it this way: the people of West Papua. First of all, what's the population? What's the population of West Papua?
Well, the Indonesians have stopped reporting on the indigenous numbers because it's so shocking. But from our estimates, the indigenous population of Papuans is around 2.5 or 2.2 million. And we think the population of the Indonesian transmigrants is perhaps slightly less. That's the same.
Okay. And out of this population, we know there are a lot of children. I watched the video, I saw innocent children, probably don't even know what's going on, right? They're just living their daily lives and everything. How much of the genocide have you seen directed at women and children?
It's directed at everybody, but women have been particularly targeted. I don't know if I want to describe the atrocities on your show. They are well documented, but as I say, women are systematically sterilized if they go into hospital. So they want to go into hospital if they get sick. We have a lot of women, children, and elderly who have had to flee to the jungle due to the aerial bombing campaigns. We, of course, suffer from malnutrition and exposure. And, of course, young men are targeted because of the Indonesian military. They are part of the liberation movement. And, of course, the majority of people are part of the liberation movement. So a lot of young men are beaten, tortured, here, and just thoroughly executed.
Are there any examples of indigenous West Papuans serving in any government capacity in Indonesia?
There are.
What I want to ask is there a faction of West Papuans who are like, want to settle with Indonesian rule?
They've been, well, Indonesia's been there now, for over 60 years. So, of course, there is P60. There are Papuans marrying Indonesian women. There are Indonesian men marrying Papuan women. They have these massive transmigration camps, and the ratio of Papuans is only 10%. So when they build townships, they only allow the indigenous population to occupy 10% of the houses. And that's an intentional process of assimilation. So Papuans in government services, but the majority take the Indonesian.
I see. Jomo, let's get some last words from you before we go. The sound, I'm not happy with the sound. I'm getting feedback from my team that the sound is not the best right now. But before we go, Jomo, let's see if we can squeeze in something. If we can manage to hear, some last words from you. And I promise, Jomo and Julian, I personally am going to do a little more research on this. Please send me as much material as you can, and I'll invite you back to pick this matter up. Because again, like I said, to a lot of us, it's a new topic, right? But now that we know, we will figure out what to do next. But Jomo, last words, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Kwesi. I am really happy that you are ready to join. So we really need you. We will really need support this to the government of Ghana, so they can also support, because there's a lot of West Papua. Music is here. I've been receiving messages from the very, very bad and West this is what is happening.
Thank you, Jomo Hutaa. And Julian, before we go for today, and I'm emphasizing for today because this is going to be an ongoing discussion, we will be checking in with you from time to time to see what progress is being made, what we can do at any point, if we can sound the horn a little louder for people to hear what's going on and all that. So that's the promise we're making to you. But before we go for today, some last words, please.
Thank you, Kwesi. Yes, well, if your audience can push their representatives, your representatives, pick up the case, I think that's probably the best thing. Obviously, from what I know from Jomo, has quite a unique system. You have a council of paramount chiefs, and those paramount chiefs have the ability to implement government policy. I think one of the best things you can do is speak to your paramount chiefs, to your representatives, and seek their intervention on behalf of the West Papuan people.
All right. Julian McKinley King, thank you very much for your selflessness. And as promised, we will be checking in back with you for updates on what's going on in West Papua. Jomo Hutaa, say to you as well, thank you very much for joining us today on the show. And team, apologies for the poor sound. We will try to do a quick reset and we'll be right back. Thank you very much, gentlemen. And we'll go for a short commercial break. We will be right back after this one.